So in this video about the 500 levels, the unconditional love level, I'm gonna have to rely completely on my own experience because I've not really met anybody else at these levels, so I'm just gonna have to talk about how it's been for me, and you're just gonna have to take it as it is, and be aware that it can probably be different for different people. I don't know, but for me, I was in the 400s, higher 400s, and at this time I was a student, and I was going up to this retreat center with an Enlightened teacher at level 1000. I was going to every retreat with him, and he had retreats like a couple of times a year or whatnot. So I came up there I was in the higher 400s, and I remember I asked him a question in one of the sessions, and like everybody is there, like 50 to 100 people sitting around, and you can ask the teacher questions if you have any and whatnot, right? And you basically are blissed out by his energy, and that's what satsang is called. It's basically sitting with an Enlightened teacher and being exposed to that Buddha field and asking him in questions, and then you get his full attention on you, which even more blasts you with that energy. So I asked him a question. I don't remember what it was, but I remember that he responded completely differently than he used to. Usually he was very soft and loving, and often kind of funny when he responded, right? But this time he was completely different. His energy just changed, he became like a brick wall, and I just ran my head into that brick wall energetically, and it felt really unfair because I didn't feel like I'd done something wrong or asked something wrong or done something bad. I didn't feel like I deserved that kind of harsh response, so to speak. I didn't understand why. But later I realized that he did this for a very good reason, and it created a big chaos inside me. So basically he hammered me, so to speak, and I think he must have seen the blockage and what was holding me back at this time. Because many times these Enlightened teachers will not respond to your words and what you're saying. They will respond to what they see or what you communicate with your totality of your being. And that's what he did. So he saw some kind of block in me. I'm not sure what this block is. I think there is a universal kind of bottleneck at the higher 400 levels, and I think the reason is that in the 400s you've carved out a cocoon for yourself, and it's really roomy and spacious, and you have a good life, and you feel good, and you feel confident, and you feel safe in that cocoon. And it's like you're driving through life in a finely tuned sports car, right? So why would you want to go out of that? Why would you want to leave that cocoon, which feels so good, and you're so confident and safe inside that cocoon? But you can't really stay inside that cocoon. If you want to, you have to sort of shed that whole identity and that whole level, and that cannot be done easily. So the teacher saw this intuitively or whatever, and he just hammered me, and he basically broke open this whole cocoon and pulverized it inside me, so to speak. So basically I got really angry at him. I didn't show it, but I tried to hide it, but he probably knew. But I just sat there, I didn't say anything, and then when the session was finished, I went away and I went to be by myself. And then I had a lot of anger coming up, and a lot of chaos in my system coming up. And I considered leaving the whole place and never coming back because I was so pissed off. I felt like I was treated unfairly and in front of everybody, like I was an idiot or something, But eventually I was sitting there meditating on this chaos and just observing it inside. And then I just came to this realization, like, hey, he's the Enlightened teacher. He must know what he's doing, right? So I just sort of surrendered to it. And that's when finally the chaos started to fade away, and I sort of emerged out of that chaos. I found a completely different level, like a plateau level. And suddenly I was overwhelmed with this feeling of love for everybody, like for him, for everybody up there, for basically everybody I met, and every people, or all the people I could see and think of. I had this immense sense of love, for no reason. Like I would just love people and love everything. Like impersonal, I couldn't help it basically. So that was a big change, like a big emerging out of that chaos came like a new plateau level and of clarity and love that I had never experienced before. And then I was basically in the lower 500s. And the teacher knew what happened, even though I never talked to anybody about this. I never talked to him, I never told anybody. But the next session with him, I was not there, but I listened to a recording later, and he talked about what happened to me. He addressed this because, people had noticed what happened, obviously, so he had to address it like in front of everybody. But I wasn't there, luckily, because he probably wouldn't have talked about it if I was. But anyway, what he said was that sometimes I rarely do this, but sometimes I have to be harsh and, hammer you a little bit, because I see the blockage in you and you can't see this yourself, and you just have to sort of trust that I know what I'm doing. And I saw that in him, and luckily he got it. Because you can easily get angry and the ego can take it, and you can get angry at me and you can get pissed off and you just maybe you want to leave the whole place like I wanted to do. So he understood this, he saw it, and that was the good thing. I mean, he recognized that something major had happened, even though I never told him. So and then basically I left that retreat later, went back to the city again, and the next retreat was when things really started to heat up and happen for real, like in the love levels in the 500s. So now I was in the lower 500s, and the very first satsang, a very first meeting with the teacher in the next retreat, like 6 months later or something. Then I had this strong Kundalini energy coming up my spine, hitting my brain with pleasure waves, and I never knew that. I read about this like in yogic literature and books. I read about Kundalini, but I didn't really think it was real and could be so vivid and real. But it came up my spine like in waves, hitting my brain with pleasure and bliss, and it became stronger and stronger every day. And it lasted for a whole day. After a few days, it started lasting for a whole day. So I was just sitting around, blissed out all the time, and could almost not do what I was supposed to do, like in terms of helping out in the kitchen and these kind of things you have to do. I could almost not do it because I was so blissed out from this. And eventually, after 1 week of this building up, I was alone in my cabin in the evening meditating, and then I had these weird experiences, like the Kundalini bliss got more and more intense, and then my pineal gland in the middle of the head started to vibrate strongly. And I could basically move this vibration up and down my spine and whatever I wanted. And this candlelight was flickering and bothering me a little bit. So I moved this vibration up to the top of my skull. And like an energy beam extended out from that vibration all the way over to the flickering candle light, like 2 meters away. And it touched it. And then from that moment forward, the candle, the flame would not move at all. So there was no flickering anymore. That sort of weird stuff happened, and it all became more and more intense. I was completely blissed out, almost in ecstasy at this point. And then something came in from behind. I can only describe it as that. Something came in from behind and cut off my mind at the root. That's how it felt. And when I eventually got out of this, I went for a walk, and I went over these fields, and I could see these massive rocks, and I could see like emptiness in form, as Buddha describes it. So these rocks, they looked like something I could lift or push with my finger, basically. They looked empty. These massive rocks and boulders, they looked completely empty. Like I could just lift them up with one hand or whatever, but obviously I couldn't do that, but it looked like it. So I could see like the emptiness in everything in this state I was in. And it was like almost like looking halfway into fourth density, like you're on a light acid trip or something. That's how it went. So I went around in nature and had this amazing walk, and I noticed immediately that hey, I'm completely present in the moment, effortlessly. Like I don't have to do anything. I'm completely in the now. I don't. There is no daydreams taking me away from the moment anymore. And then I went to sleep eventually, and the same happened when I woke up in the next morning. I was scared that I would lose this somehow, but it was still there. Like I didn't lose anything. I was still blissed out. I still had Kundalini, and I still was completely absorbed in the moment. I had no daydreams. I could sit down and meditate, and you could sit and be completely silent inside. No thought activity, no daydreams taking me away from the moment. And the same was when I went through the day and did my stuff and whatnot. No matter what I did, I was always present in the moment from that moment forward. So that was when I went into the higher 500s. Like that's how it's a big difference from the lower to the higher 500s, above 540 basically. And eventually I went back to the city, and I was doing my master's degree at this time, and so it was obviously really hard to fit in with anybody because I was so different. Like I didn't even know what was going on with me. Like, I was blissed out, I was lighting up the whole room, and the professors and whatnot, they had no idea how to deal with me because they were like looking at me like shocked, like this is unlike anything they ever seen from any other students. Like most of the students are like in the 200s and into partying and drinking and going crazy, right? And they never seen anything like this, like basically a saint. You reach the sainthood levels like in the higher 500s. So, that obviously that's not common a common thing. And I would walk around in the city, and whole blocks, like whole neighborhoods of people, like 40 people would just stop what they were doing and looking at me. And I was just walking normally down the street, right? And they would just stop and look over at me like what the hell is this? That's the kind of thing, that's how it was in that level, walking around in the city and, just doing normal things, or trying to. And I couldn't fit in with the other students. They all looked at me like, "Hi, what the hell is this guy? Like this is, some of the guys were like threatened by it. They didn't like it because obviously you bring up their negativity when you are that high level above them. You bring up, automatically provoke and bring up their darkness and negativity in them. And that especially goes for men. And women, they are more like receptive, and they kind of like the energy, usually at least. But they might take it personally and think you're hitting on them, or that you're loving them, not unconditionally, but it's about them. So anyway, it became really hard to function with other students and basically other people. I had only one friend who was also up in that retreat center, and he understood what was going on to a certain degree. He was not that high level yet, so so he couldn't really understand, but at least I could talk to him about these things, and I could hang out with him. So I had basically one friend at that time, and I hung out with him mostly, or mostly I stayed for myself, and I became more and more isolated. And luckily I could work on my master degree, and mostly by myself. I didn't really need that much help, so I stayed alone a lot. I didn't, I became more and more isolated because of all these things, and eventually after 2.5 years or more than 2 years of this bliss, the bliss started to fade away, and that's when the problems started for me. I talk about this in other videos also, but I'm not going to go into all the details. But eventually the bliss faded away gradually, and I was left with these 2 early childhood core traumas that I didn't even know I had, that basically was completely exposed in me, but because all the protective layers have been stripped away now. And I basically went into a dark night of the soul because of these 2 traumas, early childhood traumas that I couldn't do anything about. I tried everything I could possibly do to heal them. I didn't even know that I had these things. I didn't understand what was going on, because I thought I'd found a permanent level of bliss, but that really didn't really happen like that. It went away eventually, and I was still present in the moment, but I was suffering in the moment, so it wasn't the same anymore. And eventually I heal these core issues. That's what I talk about in my 2 videos called Healing My Early Childhood Traumas, or whatever the title is. You can check those videos. I also have a new playlist called My Journey, which I detail all of these things in several different videos. You can check if you want, but the point here is that it can be really not dangerous, but it can be a big surprise if you get into the love levels, that you're losing the bliss and you get into a dark night of the soul, which for me lasted for more than 10 years, like 12, 13, or maybe around 15 years or something, like a lot, or more than a decade, with severe suffering, almost worse than it was below 200, including also years of disease, which was almost worse than it was, and lasted longer than it did when I was low level. So I basically went through a whole cycle facing off against these core traumas, which I couldn't even heal, because I couldn't heal them without the assistance of ET/higher mind divine intervention, which I talk about in this other videos. So I couldn't even heal those things. I had countless one-on-one sessions with another enlightened teacher at level 1000, and he couldn't help me because he didn't understand anything about this, because he was granted a bypass when he was young. I didn't really go through anything, and he didn't address these, he didn't understand these things, and his energy field just provoked and irritated these core traumas in me more and more, until I felt worse and worse and worse, and I spiraled out of control, and I went to a different country far away in a self-destructive trip that lasted for many years of drinking and craziness. And in the ET divine intervention, they basically told me that they had to work really hard to get me home many nights, because I was so drunk it could have ended really badly if they didn't interfere and make sure that I got home safe in different ways. So basically I could have died, or that's what I wanted to. I basically wanted to die in some kind of freak accident, because I went into a manic state, because I was suffering all the time, continuously, all the time, worse and worse. So then I was forced into this manic state of you're manically happy, because you're trying to force yourself to be happy because you feel so bad. And in that state you become reckless and you become self-destructive and drinking and all sorts of nonsense. So that's basically, I think that's also why people get manic, because they force themselves into this state because they're suffering so much. And then, you know, when they eventually crash, they become depressive. So they sort of alternate between these two states. But I was basically permanently manic. I didn't get depressive. I was just manic all the time for years and years. And it, you know, completely nutcase crazy, like drinking so much. I mean, yeah, I can't even go into, maybe I will make a video about my drinking specifically, but it was crazy. Let's just leave it at that. But you know, I'm just trying to convey that, hey, if you get into the love levels, and especially the higher love levels, you're not home free necessarily. You might, and there's a big chance you might have to go through a dark night of the soul. It might not have to be as severe as mine and might not last that long, but who knows? I mean, I'm just trying to warn people that you might be happy staying in the 300s and 400s, because then you don't have to go through this craziness that I had to go through and almost didn't survive. I wouldn't have survived it. It wasn't for divine ET intervention and whatnot. So maybe that makes you feel better, that you know, if you're in the 300s and 400s, maybe you feel better just staying at those levels. You don't need to push so hard to get into the highest possible level necessarily. There is no evidence saying that that's going to lead to enlightenment, or there's a bigger chance of getting to enlightenment levels if you get into the higher love levels, because all the evidence shows in historical cases is that you can get enlightened from any level. You know, it doesn't matter. You can be granted that bypass or jump into the non-duality enlightenment levels from pretty much anywhere on the scale. Eckhart Tolle, like I talked about before, Eckhart Tolle went from the low bottom of the scale to the top. Like he went from below 200 into non-duality enlightenment levels in one jump, because he became more and more depressed. He didn't do anything about it. He just collapsed, and then boom, in that collapse he was granted a bypass into enlightenment. So that can happen. I mean, you can never, if you're destined for enlightenment, it will happen no matter what. You don't have to push so hard to get. That's what I did. I pushed so hard. I wanted it so much. I just never gave up. I just continued to push and to get up the scale, right? And it's sort of, I don't know, maybe I pushed too hard, maybe I went too strongly for it. I could have relaxed more, I don't know, but it's not so bad staying in the 3 and not least the 400s. You will have a very good life, and if you're meant to be enlightened, you will get it anyway. So I don't know if I recommend getting into the higher 500s. You know, you can never know if you have to go through a hardcore dark night of the soul like I had. And when I eventually healed those, after more than a decade of dark night of the soul, I eventually, with the help of the ETs and whatnot, helped to heal those core traumas causing all this. I still did not find back to the bliss I had before. I mean, I basically found okayishness, like it's more stabilized. I'm in the moment. I feel good. I feel okay, but it's still like, you know, not the same as it was in the beginning, in the first years of bliss and kundalini and whatnot. All that is basically gone. I'm still living in the now and you know, effortlessly present in the moment, and I feel pretty good. That's pretty much it. I'm not in non-duality. I'm not contentedness. I'm not in beingness, even though I heal everything there is to heal as far as I can know. I mean, basically healed traumas installed when I was 0 years old. So how much more can it be, right? That's pretty much it, as deep as you can go. So basically now I'm in the lower 600s. I'm in 630, so I'm on the borderline of non-duality, which I've been now for more than 5 years. And you know, at some point, hopefully they will grant me access to enlightenment, and I can actually start helping people and have private sessions, which is all I want to do. But you know, as long as they don't give me or grant me that access to those levels, I can't really help people in that sense. You need a Buddha field to help people, so I'm waiting for that to happen. And I'm making these videos and building my channel and trying to help people. But this is just a warning, or like making you people aware that, hey, you're not home free in the love levels. It's not necessarily a good idea to push into that level, because you might have a much better life in the 400s and even in the 300s. You don't have to face off against that craziness. So you know, that's just, you know, up to you what you think about this. That's just my story, my experience with it. And there is nobody else, there's no record of anybody else going from the bottom of the scale through all the levels, then having a dark night of the soul lasting for more than 10 years, and then eventually actually healing the core issues that caused that dark night of the soul. There's no record of anybody else doing this, so I'm completely in uncharted waters. Like there's not, I have not found anybody who have gone through what I've done in this life. So it's given me a lot of wisdom and insights, definitely, and I know the scale very well. And I also peeked into non-duality for a full day. So that's the next video. I'm going to talk about what non-duality is like.